Yo, yo, yo. So, I'm here to talk about mystics. Because mystics have been on my mind now for quite some time, and I just personally find mystics very fascinating, and I believe that, they've truly been quite, they've had a crucial part here in building our world and our intelligence, our spiritual intelligence, and so on. And I also feel that there's a lot of mystics that have been and are scientists and inventors and science fiction writers even. There's been a lot of mystics in politics, I can only assume, and so on. So the more I thought about mystics, the more the topic became sort of increasingly important in my head, and I will get to that a little bit later. But it was my initial thought was just to list some traits, personality traits that a mystic carries, or might carry. But then, like I said, the more and more I thought about it, it sort of became a little bit something more than just that. But let's list for fun few traits that a mystic might have. And well, one quite obvious one that comes to mind is that you might like to ask questions. So you may be a little bit of an interviewer kind of person, almost like when you meet new people, you're so fascinated in others' sort of psychology and how their mind works and what motivates them and so on, or why they react to certain things certain ways. So you might interview sort of people, when you meet them, by asking a lot of questions. You might like interviews, podcasts, listening to those things. And you might love a little bit of controversy because, or like sort of, I would almost say like unpopular opinions, because I believe that a mystic is quite the rebel, and so you might see controversial topics as being something very revealing about what's going on in our world or in our society. And mystic is a truth seeker, a time traveler, and I would say the keeper of ancient sacred knowledge, as well as bringing forth sort of new radical information, almost new age information. So a mystic is this mixture of past, present, and the future. So you might have very strong visions of the future indeed, and the past, maybe in dreams or just daydreaming, and also the thoughts and ideas and perhaps the way you perceive our society and people and why we behave the way we do is very unique, or you see through a lot of smoking mirrors in that way. You see through facades that our society and media are building or have built. So, you know, so I would also say that, especially if you are like a younger budding mystic, I would say that, truly know thyself, because it might be difficult for you to, find validation for some of the things that you are sort of thinking and the thoughts that you are forming, because, like I said, the information, the downloads that you get, they might be, not so in the masses. It might be quite new information, or something very sacred and, sort of ancient wisdom, a little bit rare information, I would say. And then another thing which I've picked up on is that a mystic sometimes comes across a little bit like a dandy person. And what I mean by that they carry this aura of almost being not above others, but there's something a little bit like very ethereal and almost like stoic about them. So they are not, perhaps they're passionate, but in a very sort of unemotional way. And there's obviously mystics come in many different forms and packages, but I guess when we discuss anything, it's an overall discussion. So let's say there's the yogi mystic whom are not so hedonistic in nature, but even with the yogi mystics, there's something very royal about them, sort of like a little bit like not untouchable, but they sort of work within their own cocoon in a way. And, they, like I said, they seem a little stoic. And then we have maybe the more literature mystic, that might be more so into politics or somewhere in literature, like in sci-fi writing, or in the interviewing game. Perhaps they are an interviewer, or some type of personality like that. They might have this sort of more, almost like some mystic carry this a little bit like a dark vibe about them, which is not to say it's bad. And I'm gonna come back to this point later on. But like a mystic is, like I was saying, they're a little bit of a truth teller. They're not necessarily pleasant, because they are not here to please you. And that might be a little bit like off-putting to some people. So some of the things that a mystic say might be like a little bit uncomfortable even to hear, because they really sort of dig through the very, the root of things. So they, might be quite blunt with their message, but in this way that sort of forces us more so to ask questions within. Because that's the way a mystic sort of works, is that is that they ask you questions more so than give you the answer, because they believe in the wisdom that questions carry. Like that is actually, it's almost like when you ask a question, you already have the answer. It's in the question itself, the answer. So it's much more sustainable and true transformation when a person, now you have to form truthful opinion when you have to go within and find the answer, and not look for it from outside. There's this yogi mystic Sadhguru who asks, have you ever experienced anything outside of yourself? And that very much, solidifies a lot of the beliefs that mystic carries about asking questions. It's very important and truly a sign of, intelligence. And, because you have to seek. That's the thing you're gonna be doing always, in a way. But you don't have to go anywhere. It's here, the answer. But so there's that. And going back to mystics perhaps being a little bit like dandyish, like like almost like they are a little bit so like a count or a countess or something. They have this ethereal, not even like stoic quality about them. And that's something that I perhaps mystics practice sort of automatically. Is a little bit of stoicism, because it's important in order to sort of perhaps get to the truth. It's important to sort of separate emotion from how you actually think. So I think that mystics truly, practice stoicism. And a mystic is someone who, gathers information from different places. So they combine science, mythology, religion, alchemy, esoteric knowledge, spirituality, even like films, they study, they study people, they study how we react to different things. A mystic is quite the triggerer. I feel like that's part of the, I guess, job or purpose that they have, is to truly trigger something within us. So yes, like going back to being a little bit of a dandy person, I guess you could say snob, but that's not what I mean. But in order to sort of get across what I'm trying to say, so you might love collecting like fine art, or you may have like a very dandy job. You might love, fine cigars, pipes, whiskey, vintage clothes, bags. But I feel like you love to collect something, like, because I feel like a mystic is someone who is very sort of devoted to something. Like they either like read a lot, they have like a huge library, or they are into antiques, or they, or like fine music, or the arts, that arts encompasses kind of everything. But so, and that's another thing that it's quite interesting about mystics, is that they might be, they also might come across like quite traditional. So they may be, devoted to something very specific, like they might be very religious to one particular religion, but that doesn't disclose their seeking, also, or them sort of picking information on other religions and esoteric knowledge and so on. So, and science and stuff. So it's interesting mix, So that's something I would definitely say, and but the reason why indeed this subject came to be more important in my head than initially it was is because see, we have this cancel culture going on right now. And like I was talking about the fact that I feel a mystic is quite rebel, not necessarily pleasant, and a little bit of a whistleblower often. And also, like I was talking about the stoicism, so that their delivery might, rub people the wrong way. Because, first of all, we are not, we definitely, have been trained to act hatefully or be scared of the truth. So that's just a natural reaction that you would have sometimes towards the truth. But so a mystic, is not necessarily like what the cookie cutter spiritual teacher. They are a whistleblower. They make us perhaps see or look at things in a new way that might be uncomfortable, because now you are forced to look at those things that may be not so well in the world. You have to look at those traits within yourself, It's that whole thing that if you want to make a world a better place, take a look at yourself and make that change. So, so it's quite, if you think about it, it's what other approach would be sustainable or genuine than self-transformation. So let's say for eons and eons now, there's been mystics in the public eye as well, telling their mystical wisdom and knowledge and being whistleblowers and truth tellers. So now we have this cancel culture, and I feel that it's very, purposefully orchestrated to create fear-mongering, to create this sort of report atmosphere, very witch hunty, where now, the citizens have been made to sort of report on one another. It's very like if you have siblings, and maybe you had a strict household, sometimes the siblings might sort of tattletale on one another to kind of get, on the good graces of the parents. So now they were sort of, they could breathe for a moment because the other person was like on trouble. And that would create this constant sort of back and forth of, just almost like waiting for someone to do something wrong that you can point out so that your darkness stays on undercover. So, and it's also like very Scientology mentality there in the church of Scientology, they would, and that's not to mock anyone if you're a Scientologist, I mean, cool. But what I've understood is that in the church, they the other church members would report on crimes on someone else inside the church if that church member would behave out of line according to the Scientology beliefs. So, it's very that what's going on right now, and that's why I just think we need to be aware of this cancel culture and have kind of relearn perspective and objectivity when it comes to judging people and sort of discarding their message because perhaps they have done something not so holy, whatever that means, which already is kind of hypocritical because are you perfect? Again, look into your own life. So, because it's very easy to disregard very important message, only because you cannot separate your own feelings from it. Feelings can be very deceitful, especially when we, have been sort of taught to be in disalignment with our own feelings or what the heck they even are. But so you really need to honestly question sometimes yourself, like, let's say there is a controversial character, but there's something about them that perhaps they say that makes actually sense to you, but for some reason, this is kind of a weird example, but for some reason, they're hated, they're unpopular, they're it's popular for some reason to cancel them. Really, think twicely before you get onto that bandwagon, because if it's happening to someone else, I mean, it can happen to you. And do you want to live in that kind of atmosphere? Like, where do we think that this mentality ultimately will lead us? So I'm just thinking that we have lost a little bit of objectivity and perspective towards one another under this witch hunty atmosphere. And I almost want to say it's dangerous, but it's not. When we are aware of something, it kind of takes away the, power from it. So, yeah, just because, not every public persona, identifies as a witch, even though, because there's so many people in the public eye that I'm just like, that's a motherfucking witch, or that's an alchemist, that's a mystic, that's, but they, maybe they felt in their life that they are a little bit magical, they feel it, but they don't, carry themselves as such, or like come out and say, yes, I am a mystic and this is my message. They're just living their purpose. So, it's just that there obviously are people there is power in being in the public eye, it really mirrors back to all of us and what is happening inside of us. So it just, all I'm saying is be aware of the cancel culture and don't lose your mind to hype. Don't lose your mind to hype. But one quick personality thing about the mystics also is that they might carry this energy that's a little bit like childlike almost, but at the same time very sophisticated. So they might be very like eccentric, like a little bit of an odd bird, think about like Jim Carrey, think about think about, well, now I'm thinking like film characters, but like the Joker, Willy Wonka, Mad Hatter, well, maybe not him, Yagen from Game of Thrones, is it Anonymous from V for Vendetta, Richard Pryor, it's just that or like the character from Clockwork Orange. I mean, I'm not saying that you're a sociopath or a murderer, but what I'm saying is that even that main character is like he's like a child, but at the same time, he's like polite and very sophisticated and, speaks very beautifully, eloquently, and so on. So I'm just saying that a mystic can carry that type of energy, truly. And who I think the OG mystics were? Minotaurs. I love minotaurs. I always thought they were quite fascinating. And a minotaur is a half man, half Taurus, and they would live inside of a matrix maze, a pyramid or a labyrinth, a maze. And in a story, a hero would enter into a maze, and in order to get to the center or out of the maze, a minotaur would appear in front of them and ask them a question, a riddled, coded question, and the hero would have to answer to that question in order to move on. And the answer is to be found within once again. So I just thought that's quite, I don't know, there's something very cool about that. Yeah, I think minotaurs are cool, or are. So yeah, I think this is all. And I just really, really felt quite, called within myself to talk about this, because quite frankly, I'm starting to get quite like very eerie feelings about this whole cancel culture, and I'm bored with it. And I just hope that some people perhaps have the same sentiment. So maybe there's something to be done. But that something truly is to start within. And really, really observe and study the reactions that people have to controversial topics, because that honestly tells so much about where the problem lies and how to fix it, sorta. The reactions of our society, the reactions we have as human beings towards topics that are blowing up, it's very telling. Namaste, and feel the oneness.